Tutu was born in 1931 in Klerksdorp, a small mining town in the Northwest Province. His father was a teacher, his mother a domestic worker. When he was 12 years old, his family moved to Johannesburg. Tutu would spend some of his high school years living in Sophia town. This is where he met activist priest Trevor Huddleston, who would become one of his mentors. In 1953, Tutu became a teacher. 2 years later, he left the teaching profession in protest of the Bantu Education Act of 1953. The act instituted the then government's policy of inferior education to black school children. During his years studying teaching, Tutu met Nomalizo Liyashengane, a teacher, nurse, and social justice activist. He would marry her in 1955, and they had 4 children together: Trevor, Mpho, Nontombi, and Thandeka. Soon after quitting as a teacher, Desmond Tutu embarked on a new and very different career path: to become a servant of the God he so loved. A few years later, Tutu enrolled at St. Peter's Seminary and was ordained a priest in 1961. A year later, in 1962, Tutu went to King's College in London to study for a master's degree in theology. From 1967 to 1970, Tutu was a chaplain and lectured in theology at Forte University in the Eastern Cape Province and later in Lesotho. Tutu would use his religious platform to speak out against the injustices of apartheid. Apartheid was a system of legalized racism. He insisted that racial segregation was against God's will.
The Bible is radical in the original sense that it goes to the root. It is the most revolutionary thing there is around. It is one of the most subversive things that you can ever have when there is injustice and oppression and exploitation.
In 1975, Tutu became the first black dean of the Anglican Church in Johannesburg. 2 years later, he would become the church's first black bishop. In that same year, Bishop Desmond Tutu would have a sense of foreboding that something terrible was about to happen. He feared there would be bloodshed. He didn't ignore that heavy feeling. Instead, he penned an open letter to the then Prime Minister, John Vorster. He pleaded with him to abandon apartheid. His letter was ignored. 3 months after writing that letter, the Soweto uprisings broke out. That period changed the face of the struggle against the monstrous apartheid system.
Here's a priest. Here's the man of the cassock who defined himself not on his cassocks, not only in his, pastorly ring or the stick that bishops carry. No, he threw that away and he came down to the level of us as children. Remember, it was Bishop Tutu and who summoned other priests for the funeral of Hector Peterson. That was at, Regina Mundi. It was Bishop Tutu who would say, if we are marching as students of the day, we'll be in the front and tell the police, kill me first. Shoot me. Shoot me, then we'll then get into these kids. Last time I heard of a person like that was Jesus Christ.
The violence has escalated to the point where I think quite a lot of the young people, black young people, have become almost reckless in their disregard for their own life.
During the worst of times, Desmond Tutu remained a voice of reason. On one occasion, he saved the life of a man who was accused by an angry crowd of being a police informer. Tutu pleaded with the crowd to let the man leave. They listened, only to set his car alight. Bishop Tutu was a spiritual man whose spiritual connection to God was the foundation for everything that he practiced. For the bishop, prayer was a guide to morality and justice.
To the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen.
Being an activist for him was synonymous with being a man of God. Tutu felt that his utmost responsibility was to alleviate human suffering, first within his country. He would then extend this gesture to other countries. On the rest of the African continent, for instance, he went on to be known as a compassionate peacemaker who didn't mince his words.
We want to come to a South Sudan where people can drink their water and know it is safe water. We don't want to come to a South Sudan where children die because they drink contaminated water. We want to come to a South Sudan and see healthy children playing on the playgrounds of beautiful, well-built schools where all its inhabitants are healthy.
Desmond Tutu has always been a very authentic man. When he saw the horrors, the situation in Rwanda, he collapsed. He cried. So he was a compassionate person. He said, how this can happen done by human people? He's easy, approachable.
On the personal front, the bishop was a devout family man. In public spaces, he would often be seen with his wife, Mamnomalizo Leah, and he always attributed his accomplishments to her. Back to his public service and political life. In order to curtail and weaken the international struggle to end apartheid, the government revoked Tutu's passport. At this point, his commitment to a non-violent struggle to end apartheid had caught the attention of the world and that of the state security police.
I have castigated evil and oppression wherever it has happened, but I think, that we mustn't remove the focus. The focus is currently on South Africa, a government which claims to be Christian.
His efforts did not go unnoticed by the international community. While serving as the secretary of the South African Council of Churches, he succeeded in uniting most churches in South Africa in the struggle against apartheid. In 1984, Bishop Desmond Tutu was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his role as a unifying figure in the non-violent campaign to resolve the problem of apartheid in this country. Only a second South African to receive that accolade after Nkosi Albert Luthuli in 1961. In the spirit of reconciliation, a former enemy, F.W. de Klerk, was at the Archbishop's side when the Nobel Peace Laureate were honored at the waterfront in Cape Town. In 1986, Bishop Tutu knocked on the doors of the St. Cathedral in Cape Town. In the ancient tradition of bishops seeking admission to the seat of authority in the diocese. On that day, he became the first black cleric to head the Anglican Church in the province of Southern Africa, a role he would fulfill for a decade. The Arch, as he would later be affectionately known, stood with all those who stood for humanity. His criticism of apartheid and push for sanctions against South Africa led to many in South Africa despising what he stood for. In the late 1980s, he was often seen in the front lines of protest marches under the banner of the United Democratic Front. On the 11th of February 1990, the Arch was at the reins once more, when the late former President Nelson Mandela was finally released from prison 27 years after being sentenced at the end of the Rivonia trial in June 1964. He was at Mandela's side when Mandela made his first public appearance that evening on the balcony of the Cape Town City Hall, Mandela also spent his first night of freedom at the Archbishop's residence in Bishop's Court. Tutu would continue to play a leading role in the years after Mandela's release, but his message at this point was one of reconciliation.
We commit ourselves, each one of us, we commit ourselves to discipline. We commit ourselves to peace. We commit ourselves to negotiation and reconciliation. For we are the rainbow people of God. We are unstoppable. Nobody can stop us on our march to victory. Nobody, no guns, nothing. Nothing will stop us, for we are moving to freedom. We are moving to freedom, and nobody can stop us, for God is on our side. And so we raise our hands. We raise our hands. We raise our hands and we say, we will be free. All of us.
The day that Tutu had worked towards for most of his life came to pass on the 27th of April 1994, on the official day of the first ever democratic elections in this country. One of his proudest moments was announcing the late former President Nelson Mandela as the new president of South Africa.
Do you remember how blood flowed like water everywhere? How our people were killed like flies? Do you remember the many massacres? Boipatong, Sebokeng, Thokoza. And do you recall when Chris Hani was assassinated? I think if we survived that, we could survive anything.
Tutu and Mandela shared a warm friendship and a deep brotherly bond. The playful banter between the two was well known.
I think our friendship can just about survive the shoots.
I know that you have sometimes allowed that conscience to lead you a little bit astray. As for example, when you vented moral judgments on the clothing habits of others, while you yourself were going around in a frock.
In 1996, the Arch resigned as the Archbishop of Cape Town to take up a role as the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as requested by Mandela.
Hereby declare under oath that I understand and shall honor the obligation of confidentiality imposed upon me. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission is established to try and work for national unity and for reconciliation.
This commission was set up to bear witness to, record, and in some cases, even grant amnesty to the perpetrators of crime relating to human rights violations. Tutu was hopeful that South Africa's old guard would declare its complicity in apartheid before the commission. Later, he would admit to being disappointed when they did not.
We hope so very much that we will be able to get him to work voluntarily with the commission. We have had a good meeting, yes, and I'm not going to say a great deal more than that. It was a meeting held in a very good atmosphere, very friendly atmosphere.
In private and in public, the Arch was known as an emotional man, a man who always wore his heart on the sleeve.
Jesus. Get your servant, Father.
We have distorted our emotional life. We have stunted people because we have not allowed people, for men to know that there is a gentle side to them and that it is not a matter to be ashamed of, that you have a feminine side.
During the TRC hearings, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer.
People have been praying for me. People have sent good wishes, and I would just want to say thank you very much to them for that support.
How you feel? Good.
A little tender. Don't ask me where.
Tutu also took the baton to help those who were living with HIV and AIDS. He was a vociferous voice to end the stigma associated with those suffering with this disease.
What we have been doing with people who live with HIV, AIDS, is what used to take place in biblical times with those who were said to suffer from what was called leprosy. We are meant to reach out and embrace. We are meant to say, you belong in our community, that we are diminished when you are diminished.
The Arch was made Emeritus Archbishop of Cape Town, an honorary title that is unusual in the Anglican Church. Archbishop Tutu retired in 1996.
They said the reserve most unlikely to play.
After officially announcing his retirement, the Arch continued his unofficial role as guardian of South Africa's moral compass. He would take on yet another project to help serve humanity. He became part of the Elders, an independent group of global leaders working together for peace, justice, and human rights. The Arch's invitation to the Dalai Lama, a Tibet spiritual leader, to attend his 80th birthday, in spite of the diplomatic row it caused, bared testimony to his continued moral stance against oppression. The South African government at the time had rejected the Dalai Lama visa application 3 times in a row due to pressure from Beijing.
We were helped by the international community to overcome apartheid. People were opposed to injustice and oppression, and people believed that we South Africans would automatically be on the side of those who were being oppressed. Tibet is being oppressed. Our government, representing me, says it will not support Tibetans who are being oppressed viciously by the Chinese. Hey, Mr. Zuma, you and your government don't represent me.
Tutu and the Dalai Lama enjoyed years of affectionate, brotherly friendship.
He's actually a bundle of joy. I have sometimes got to tell him, because he is, in fact, quite mischievous. I have to warn him sometimes and say, hey, look here. The cameras are on us. You need to try and behave like a holy man. He's not listening.
I will not listen.
Behave like a holy man.
Post-apartheid, Tutu continued to be a sharp voice against injustice. Till his last days, he was very vocal in condemning corruption, the inefficiency of government to deal with poverty and unemployment, and other societal ills. For a man who stood for such solemn causes, the Arch was always able to laugh at himself. his keen sense of humor and joy for life were some of his absolute best qualities.
I went to Holland because in one of the villages they had decided to name a school after me. Now, that's not the important part of it. The thing is that this school was celebrating 400 years of existence. And so when I arrived, one of the children came up to me and said, were you here when the school started? Well, I mean, I know that I did know that I was fairly decrepit, but I didn't think quite that decrepit.
A veteran anti-apartheid activist, a peace campaigner, a loving husband, a father and grandfather. Tutu's last public appearance was when he cast his special vote in the 2021 local municipal elections. As always, his wife, Mamnomalizo Leah, was right next to him. Till the end, Desmond Tutu remained a passionate critic of injustice. He was a humble and devout man.
May his soul rest in eternal